Jesus is at it again. He's doing those things that defy convention and defy the way life would be known in that time and place. I was very fortunate yesterday to be invited to join the Brotherhood of St. Andrew for their breakfast and Eucharist. And as part of our discussion, we shared kind of what were some of the nuggets and the themes that we drew from this story that we heard in the Gospel of Luke this morning. And one such theme that came to mind was that of talking the talk and walking the walk. There is this essence that's going on. In the chapter prior to what we've heard this week and the previous weeks, chapter 6, we hear Jesus giving the Sermon on the Plain. In Luke's Gospel, this is the equivalent of Matthew's Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew's Sermon on the Mount, Jesus goes and elevates his message to elevate the people, to bring the elevation of what that means to be a follower of Christ and to be a part of God's kingdom. In Luke's Gospel, it's a little bit different. Jesus comes off of the mountain to give that sermon. He comes to a level place. And that's a very common theme we find in Luke's Gospel, a leveling of the playing field. What we have in the Gospel story this morning is a Pharisee, Simon. And Simon does the right and good thing. He invites Jesus into his home to be a part of a meal with him. But there's something else going on. Simon leaves it at that. And yet there's another person who enters into this scene. It's a woman. And all we know of her is that she is a sinner. She is a woman who was called a sinner in the community, while Simon is there as one with great reputation. So you can already see the juxtaposition between the Pharisee and this sinner. And what's going to happen in this story, we'll find out as we go on. But before we do, I'd like to tell you a story. It's a movie that we have at our home. It's a movie called The Good Dinosaur. And I don't know if you've seen this. Edward helped me tell the story yesterday, didn't you, Edward? Yeah, at the Brotherhood meeting. But if you have children or grandchildren, I really encourage you to watch it. And if you don't have those, I still encourage you to watch it. It's a wonderful story. But there's something that takes place in this story. The story is about this dinosaur named Arlo. He's the baby dinosaur in the family. And a little just tidbit that you need to know for perspective is that the dinosaurs are like the humans in the story, and the humans are kind of like the animals that never quite developed fully. And so you've got this juxtaposition between the dinosaurs and this little human. But Arlo in this movie is trying to make his mark. His dad tells him this phrase, "You're going to leave your mark one day, Arlo, and you'll know when that happens." And so this whole time, Arlo is worried about how is he going to leave his mark. He doesn't quite know who he is and how he fits into his family. He's kind of the runt, and he doesn't quite get the job done the way his brother and sister do. So he struggles with that. Well, one day his dad takes him out for a job, and his dad says, "This is your day to leave your mark. This is a job for you." And there had been a creature who'd been coming and stealing all of their corn, because the dinosaurs farm, as you know. Don't get caught off guard, okay? But his job was to guard their harvest of corn, because there was a critter coming taking all of their corn. And so Arlo kind of builds himself up, and he's ready to protect their corn and to guard it. He's marching back and forth with a big stick, just waiting to catch the little critter. Well, all of a sudden, the little critter comes. And it's this tiny little human. Tiny little human. And he gets really nervous and really scared. And so he runs away, and that's kind of Arlo's story, is he's always running away from these things that confront him. Well, he eventually runs away, and his dad gets a little frustrated. And so they go to try to finish the job. His dad takes him. He says, "We're going to finish this job." And they go after the critter. Well, as they do, a storm comes, and Arlo's dad gets swept away down the river, never to be seen. And there's where he leaves the movie, Arlo's dad. But then later, Arlo gets frustrated, and he goes and searches for this little critter because he sees him again. And they both get swept down the stream through this river. And the whole story is Arlo trying to get back home. But the whole time, he's in tension with this little creature because he thinks he's supposed to go out and get him. Well, there's all of a sudden a moment of reconciliation. And it's this aha moment in the story where the little boy comes to his rescue and saves Arlo. And not just that, they go to a deeper level. Arlo learns from the little boy that his father too has died. And Arlo shares that about him in his life. And in that moment of deep pain and tragedy, these two at odds creatures find reconciliation. They recognize in one another that they share a common bond, that they share something special. They share love and a desire to make a difference. So Arlo and the little creature from then forward go on to continue their journey back home. And yes, in the end of the story, Arlo leaves an incredible mark. I think for all of us in all of our lives, we want to have that same mark left in the world around us. We want our life to have purpose, and we want to be in reconciliation with one another. What we hear in Simon and the sinful woman today is where that gap lies. That gap lies in not being able to see ourselves in one another and seeing God in one another. For in that moment, who is in the midst of that story? It all centers around Jesus, around the Christ, around God in our human form. And on both sides, we have people of varying degrees of place in society. And yet Jesus says, to one who much is forgiven, loves much. That's what we are called into. And to seeing ourselves as a part of the story of forgiveness, reconciliation, and great love. There is a mark for us to leave on this world, because there's a mark that has been left within us. And hopefully, unlike Simon, we will be able to recognize where in our lives we have found forgiveness, acceptance, and love. That is the message of the good news. That is what Jesus calls all of us into. But first, we must see in one another ourselves and God's image. For it is then that we can truly leave a mark, not just in our own hearts, but in the world around us. Amen.